Good morning. I hope everyone's ready for spring break as soon as you get done watching the video and as soon as you complete the daily writing. Today we're moving on to part 5 of the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. When we wrap this up, we are moving into Ordinary Grace. Remember that with Ordinary Grace, you're going to be writing a review, a literary analysis of the book, and then we'll be moving on to Trail of Lightning. Trail of Lightning will have a couple of options, I believe, with the writing assignment, and we'll talk about that when we get to the book. Remember that your revisions are due tonight at 11:59. As we discussed in class, it is the first 2 pages that need to get revised, along with the works cited page that needs to get revised. Please remember the criteria. The presentation has been linked to D2L, so if you have any questions, you should be able to look at Wednesday's presentation. A quick reminder today, Group A is in the classroom. Group B is hopefully watching this. When we get back from break, Group B gets to class, and then we'll be wrapping up the book that week. Remember that we're starting writing labs over, and so we'll be back with Writing Lab A, TJ, Sean, Brooke, and Husseini. And Group A will be Wednesday the 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Quick thing here. I realize those of you watching this who are tempted to sprint past the video probably will skip this slide, but please watch the video in its entirety. The goal of this is to make it as close as possible to a classroom presentation. And when I look at, presentation number 4, the total time on the slide was 17 minutes, 19 seconds. When I look at the average view duration, it was just under 5 minutes. That indicates to me that people aren't watching things in their entirety, that some of you might be skipping through and just getting to the daily writing. I can't help you write better. I can't help you prepare for the assignments better. I can't help you improve your writing for this class and every other class that you're going to be taking on campus or off campus if you're not watching the whole thing. So please watch the video in its entirety. We talked about what do I want to know? What do I need to know? What should I want to know? How can I acquire what I need to or want to know? And how can I use what I want to know? We talked about those as part of Wednesday's presentation. I think one of the questions we should be looking at, in addition to all of those, is why. Why do the events transpire as they have? Why do people act the way that they do? Why are some people able to negotiate the way life is easily, and other people are not? Why, I think, is a key question for the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And as we talk about the whys, I want to put some things into context, and then just kind of move on from there. On page 163, we get this quotation. Gangrene was spreading from Day's toes to his knee. His doctor said his toes needed amputating, but Day refused. He said he didn't want doctors cutting on him like they did Henrietta. At 52, Sonny felt the same way. His doctor said he needed angioplasty, but he swore he'd never do it. Why is someone willing to let gangrene spread through his body? Why is someone turning down angioplasty? Why is someone not trusting the doctors? Now, there's kind of an answer in here. He didn't want the doctors cutting on him like they did Henrietta. But why did that experience, or what about that experience, push Day to take the risks he's taking, or push Sonny to take the risks he's taking. Let's run through a couple of things here. The other thing I think we've got is, again, this is a why. Deborah realized these movies were fiction. But for her, the line between sci-fi and reality had blurred years earlier when her father got the first call saying Henrietta's cells were still alive. Deborah knew her mother's cells had grown like the blob until there were so many of them that they could wrap around the earth several times. It sounded crazy, but it was true. So why does this true statement all of a sudden blur the line between reality and science fiction? Why does the fact that the cells are still living cause her to believe that there's this blob-like mutation? All right. And why does she believe that the film has the same amount of truth as what Skloot's telling her? I think there's a lot of whys there. And I think in a lot of ways, it boils down to something we've talked about before. I'll get to that at the end of the presentation. But let's keep going. The book talks about the Tuskegee syphilis study. Hundreds of African American men had with syphilis. The researchers watched them die slow and preventable deaths, even after penicillin was available to cure them. And they were offered free physical exams, hot meals, transportation, and a $50 burial fee. And this study lasted over 40 years. So when you go back to Day and Sonny, they were aware of the Tuskegee syphilis study. They were aware of all of this, and they may well have believed that these men were injected with syphilis intentionally. We'll talk about that later. But the fact of the matter is, when you talk about why don't they trust the doctors, things like this cause them, I think, not to trust the doctors. Okay? There was some stuff that was really good. Free physical exams, free meals, free transportation, free funerals. All of those are good. Why? I think the idea of why is this happening, or why, did they not trust, and why was this allowed to go on? The other question I think I've got here is, did you know about this? And if you didn't, why not? Why hasn't it been talked about more? If you did, great. Then in the book, they also talk about the Mississippi appendectomies. They were not appendectomies, they were unnecessary hysterectomies performed on poor black women to stop them from reproducing and to let the doctors practice the procedure. The book also talked about the night doctors, where black corpses were exhumed from graves for research, and the bodies arrived in the north in barrels labeled turpentine. Once again, why was this stuff allowed to go on? Why did this stuff happen? And if we look at Day and we look at Sonny, and they know about this, I think it starts answering a question of why. Why is there this mistrust of doctors? Okay, why is there this mistrust of science? The idea of all of these atrocities, I think, is an important thing to look at in the book. The book talks about them. The book doesn't play them up. The book doesn't sensationalize them. I don't want to sensationalize them, but I do think we have to look at all of these experiments that were done in human beings without their consent that led to deaths that were preventable. In the case of the Tuskegee thing from the previous slide. And then the book talks about Johns Hopkins. Babette believed that Johns Hopkins was known for experimenting on black folks. They'd snatch them off the street. They used blood samples from children to look for genetic predisposition for criminal behavior. That seems to be something that scientists should have known better at the time it happened. And then there was a lawsuit where children were exposed to lead so that Johns Hopkins researchers could look at the effects of lead. Again, there's a lot of stuff where it seems to me that the Lax family has reasons other than the cells to distrust doctors, distrust science. Let's run through a couple more. I found these from livescience.com. I'm not sure what the date was, but psychologists ran a secret experiment in the 1960s and 70s in which they separated twins and triplets from each other and adopted them out as singlets. Apparently, this was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, and it came to light when three identical triplet brothers accidentally found each other in 1980. So, in other words, they took these children and they separated them at birth intentionally, breaking up a family bond that should have, been somewhat sacrosanct. And if you check out the article, the people who conducted this study are pretty unrepentant about it. The idea was they let people develop on their own. The people involved in the study have a far different view of it. If you look at this, the Tuskegee participants, according to this article, were not intentionally injected with syphilis. However, Guatemalan prisoners and mental asylum patients were. And it was intended to test chemicals to prevent the spread of the disease. They attempted to infect subjects by paying for them to have sex with prostitutes. So, in other words, they intentionally affected people in mental asylums and prisoners with syphilis just to study the disease. The article will go on to say that the United States government apologized for this in the 2000s sometime. I can't remember the exact date right off the top of my head. And then speech pathologists at the University of Iowa set out to prove their theory that stuttering was a learned behavior caused by child's anxiety about speaking. They chose to go about this by telling stuttering orphans that they were doomed to start stuttering. And the experiment didn't induce stuttering, but it did make formerly normal children anxious, withdrawn, and silent. So in other words, they just played mind games with these kids who were under the care of the state, who were orphans, who had nobody to speak up for them. And they just played the mind games with them to see if stuttering was a learned behavior. And they found out it wasn't. I think the answer to why all of this stuff occurred is found in the book as well. The researcher named Stevenson is quoted on page 216, and I think that this is kind of one of the keys. And we talked about this in one of the previous presentations. Forgetting about the human story. How do you try to get orphans to stutter? How do you intentionally affect people with syphilis? How do you ignore that people can be treated with penicillin? How do you do all of these things without consent? And I think Stevenson gives us the answer. Scientists don't like to think of HeLa cells as being bits of Henrietta because it's much easier to do science when you disassociate your materials from the people they come from. In other words, you forget that the cells you're looking at are human. You forget that the people you're dealing with are human. You forget that the subjects are human. You disassociate your materials from the people they come from. And so for the Lax family, they're trying to keep the association alive. As the debate over ownership of human tissues played out around the country, the Lax brothers continued to tell anyone who'd listen that Johns Hopkins had stolen their mother's cells and owed them millions of dollars. And Deborah started handing out newsletters about her mother and the cells saying, I just want you all to read what's on this paper and tell everybody, bring it around. We want everybody to know about my mother. Not the cells, but the mother. Now, perhaps part of the problem, the brothers were talking about millions of dollars and forgetting the fact that they should be talking about the mother. But nonetheless, it seems to me the Lax family was concerned about the human story. The scientists were forgetting the human story. And the researchers doing the unethical experiments on children, on prisoners, on poor uneducated people, the digging up, exhuming bodies without anybody's consent for medical research, all of those people were forgetting the human story, that all of these people were part of a family, mothers, fathers, siblings. And so the human story is forgotten. And again, I mentioned this once before. I want to mention it again. I think one of the great things about this book is it reminds us that everybody has a human story. Daily writing. A couple of presentations ago, I talked about the Callician corollary that states that even though experts may frequently be incorrect, it doesn't mean we should start trusting those who are not experts. Today's presentation dealt with experts acting cruelly. How should one react to the actions outlined in the presentation today? And if possible, create your own maxim about how to deal with this situation. I hope everyone has a good spring break, and we'll see you on Monday the 15th. Have a good one. And before I forget, please get that paper in by 11:59 tonight.